My name is Alana Sweeny, and I'm President and CEO of the United Way of Westchester and Putnam. And I'm very excited to talk about our United to Read initiative and the partnerships that we've made around it to get all children on grade level reading at the end of third grade, and hopefully even beyond third grade reading. Today we're speaking with Jay Connor, who is the President and CEO of Learning Ovations. Now you wonder, why are we working with something called Learning Ovations? Well, the United Way has been involved in third grade reading success for quite a while now. And we believe that this is extremely important as a marker for children, because the predictive value of third grade reading is very, very strong for a child's future success, not only in school, but in life. Whether they get involved in risky behaviors, whether they're ready for a STEM career or other, we know that third grade reading is a keystone indicator. So Jay, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about third grade reading and why you got into it.
Well, first of all, Alana, I'm just thrilled to be here. You've been a tremendous partner of ours for multiple years as we've been working with local school districts here to reach out, and then also with the community in terms of explaining the importance of third grade reading. So thank you. The second point I think that's most important is that there are a lot of different tools and techniques. School districts have spent billions of dollars over the last 20, 25 years, yet the outcomes are pretty much the same. And so what Learning Ovations in participation with the Florida Center for Reading Research really did is go back and say, how do we understand through heavy, rigorous research what it actually takes to be able to have all children in general education classrooms reading on grade level? So in many ways, Alana, what we're talking about is how to bring rigorous, SS-strong research to the community.
And that's really interesting, because when you look at reading results and you take a look at 2015 to 2017 and all of the money that we put into the education, all of the money that we put into the classrooms, yet there really hasn't been much of a change, has there?
No, it's actually been pretty much the same level for the last 25 years. What the research was predicated on is we know from very good, solid research that right now to 92% by the Fordham Institute of teachers, superintendents, we know what it takes to be able to support students reading at grade level in the general education classroom. It takes really individualizing for that child, understanding what each child's needs are, then also understanding that teaching reading is difficult. There is an explicit and systemic way of doing it. And the third point is doing it in small groups is 4 times more effective than doing it in a whole class. So what our research was predicated on is how do we take that practice that we know works and make it available and supportive to teachers within every one of the schools that we're working with.
And I think when you talk about the individualization and you talk about the small groups, the first thing most of us probably think about is taking and dividing a classroom into 4 or 5 and all of the children working on the same activity in small groups. Right. How does this differ?
Well, crucially there is that the first part of it, in terms of having children work independently plus having a teacher working with some of the children, that's all right. The problem is that if each child is working on the same thing, it's not much different than teaching to the whole class. Is what you really need to do is be able to have each of those centers or each of those tables that's working on specific activities, specific supports for those children at that table. And that's the real secret in terms of using technology, is that in many ways we can use technology to do that heavy lifting of saying, what does this particular child need and how do I deliver the right type and timing of instruction? That frees up the teacher to really do the art of teaching. They're not trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what does this child need? How do I be able to deliver it? That's delivered for them. Then they're really able to be their best teacher with the children in the classroom.
Well, let's go back to assessment, because we've had a lot, especially in New York, with opting out of tests. So could you talk just a little bit about the assessment piece of this and why it's so important?
Well, first of all, the research, the result of that research is called A to I, which is assessment to instruction. So the assessment is a very important part of it. But we truly believe that the assessment and the testing bandwagon has been really overblown. And so in many ways, what the research has shown is that you can, in those small group tables, within 10 to 15 minutes, as part of a small group activity, be able to get the children's assessment, know what their skills are, know what their needs are, know what their progress monitoring is, without having to take teacher time, without having to take any additional time to load that into the software. It can all be done automatically. So in many ways, what we do is provide an assessment protocol that really runs itself. And so you're not talking about this huge additional investments of time and, more importantly, of a valuable teacher resource to do testing. So the reason why most testing has gotten a bad name is because of how much of it's done and that it takes so much time away from the children. This is a context where you can do assessments while you're still with the children.
And the purpose of the assessments. This is not to be able to have something that you're sending off somewhere,
right,
but it's really to determine what the exact amounts of timing, sequence, and content of the instruction is for that individual child. And I think that that's really a key piece of it that I've found so interesting, that they found that each child needs a different amount of the timing and the sequence. And the content of the instruction. And I remember one time you talking about a child who might be a whole lot better off sitting in the corner reading Harry Potter than actually doing phonics work or whatever.
Right. The research has shown that for some children, a phonics worksheet can actually degrade their performance. For other children, having them read independently doesn't provide them the kind of nutrition and experience that they need. So what individualizing for the children does is actually support all the children in a classroom. So if you're in a typical classroom today, let's say a first grade classroom, a teacher has students that have pre-K level capacity experience, and they have a second grade or third grade. If you're teaching to the center, you're missing those two, which in many classrooms today are the predominant numbers. It's not just a bell-shaped distribution. It really is almost equally distributed across. By being able to teach to each child, you then can support the successful readers, and you can also support the struggling readers. So not only are we able to get over 90% of the children at the end of third grade reading on grade level, but we're also to have in high need populations, the average being the fifth grade reading rate. That's how you get to the STEM participation. That's how you get to the tremendous impacts that we have in the future educational possibilities. Much lower high school dropout rate, much less involvement in the criminal justice system, much more post-secondary involvement, because in many ways you've been able to support each child where their needs are.
And I find that very interesting. And as a former teacher, when you think about trying now, if the teachers who might be listening to you right now are probably in total panic. How do you expect me to do that with a class of 25 students? And how did you ever come to what these rights amounts are for each child and what the right instruction is for that child?
That's a great question. Is that the first thing that we did for over 5 years with funding from the Department of Education and NIH is really sit and observe classrooms. So it was very much about understanding what is really going on in the classroom. And over the entire course of the research, the teachers are our co-designers, because it's that iterative process in terms of what's going on in the classroom, how do we improve that, how do we support you in being able to accomplish it. As I look at the issue, it's how do teachers now, with one arm tied behind their back, be able to teach effectively versus if we support them with the kind of technology that we're talking about that actually, comes down to lesson planning for an entire classroom. Could be 35 kids, could be 20 kids within 20 minutes a week, that you have all of the lessons for all of those different groups. So what we're finding in our classrooms is the teachers are actually spending far less time in teacher prep, far less time doing the things that are not in the interface with children than they are now, where they're able to spend the time with the children.
That's really very interesting, because I think that teachers do get fearful. We've just had a new curriculum, or we've just had a new assessment, and now you're putting some other requirement on me. So what we're actually looking at is something that's going to make it much easier for the teachers and much more effective for the children. So let's take a high-need school district. In general, the kids would probably be functioning at about the 25 to 35% on grade level at the end of third grade. Is that about right?
Yeah, and we're seeing that again kind of across the board. The national average is about a third of our children across the country not reading at grade level. But that includes all children. What we're seeing in a lot of the high-need populations is between 20 and 35% of children being able to read at grade level. So the flip side of that is that we're seeing upwards of 70% of children not reading at grade level. And if you can't read at grade level and you move into the fourth grade and you start thinking about math, which are story problems at that point in time, you can see how it compounds the fact that you get further and further behind. So our key space is that K to 3 space to make sure that by the end of third grade, all children are reading at grade level.
And that's pretty amazing. And the results that you're getting, and this has been 7 randomized control studies. It was funded by the National Institutes of Health. And now the grant that we're working on is with the U.S. Department of Education. It's an expansion grant and is the only one that was granted in the entire country. So we as United Way are very excited that we've been working on this for about 4 years now and trying to see what we can do to help children both inside and outside of the classroom, because about a third of the learning goes on in the classroom space, but the rest of a child's day and year is spent out of school. So while we're focusing in this initial time on classrooms and schools and helping teachers, and I think that's a key piece of it that I'm going to have you speak to, helping teachers to be the best teachers, to be effective in using this technology not only for their planning and for knowing how to group and organize their classrooms and what the right amount of types of instruction are for a particular child to move them more than a year in a year, but also to be able to have the skill set themselves. Teachers come to school with lots of different skills. Some teachers are a first-year teacher, some are a 12-year, 15-year teacher. Some have only taught full group. Others have taught small group. So could you talk a little bit about that in the professional development piece?
Sure. One of the main understandings that we had very back in the early stages of the research is when we were finding that those 3 things that we saw from the National Reading Panel, that individualized for each child, explicit systemic instruction, and small groups that I talked about before, is that the difficulty that it was doing that within the general education classroom for most school districts and for most teachers was that to be able to individualize for a student, we had to learn how to individualize for the adults, how to be able to individualize and customize for the school district, the system we're in which those adults are. And that's what the technology, that's what that allows us to do. Therefore, we're taking all of that complexity, all of that heavy lifting away from the teacher, away from the school district, and in essence, not only supporting the lesson planning that's geared to the particular needs, but then just in time, delivering the specific activities that will be able to help those children achieve those grade levels, achieve those grade level targets.
It's really fascinating. And oftentimes when we think about bringing technology to a school or to a school district, we think of something where there's going to be a computer and the child's going to be sitting at the computer. But this is not that. What we're looking at is using it as a tool for the teacher. And what the child may be doing it may be something that's on a computer, but more likely it's not.
That's right. there are a tremendous amount of different types and activities that we can support the children. There are activities that are available in other sources beyond just the core curriculum. And so we're partnering with IBM Watson to be able to take the protocols that we've worked with in the 7 randomized control trials that are available and valuable within the classroom, and then move those protocols out into the community. And we're able to take all sorts of different resources that are available on the internet, all sorts of digital expertise. It could be a curriculum, like an Engage New York curriculum, or it could be a game from Edutopia that we are able to say, this is the exact right type and amount of instruction that would be best for this child on the dining room table after dinner, or in the after-school program, or in a summer reading loss program. So that's the beauty of once we have solid, good, evidence-based research, we're then able, once we're able to have that kind of strength within the school, we're able to radiate that out to all of the other environments where that child has learning opportunities, whether that's the home, whether that's the after-school program, the library, the summer reading loss camp. All of those now become opportunities to align and support those outcomes.
And that's really one of the reasons that United Way got very involved with this. As I said, that we've got a real focus on third grade reading success, but we're also looking at the community as a whole and at what some of the challenges that are within a community. And if you're running an after-school program very often, or a summer program, very often you're asked for educational outcomes at the end of the program. You don't have them, and it's almost impossible to get them from the schools. But we're looking at this and thinking about how far can we bring those professions, how much more effective. We're not talking about repeating what goes on in the school day, but with having Watson and having the ability to get many multiple activities and bring them to wherever we're meeting the child, that we can then really expand the profession, have those programs be able to do activities, whether they be a history or social studies, a walk around town, a science activity, and be able to make them be an activity that is really going to help further the education of those children in their literacy and in their reading, which is really very, very exciting. I see it as a way to change those entire professions.
The research that we've seen over the period of time is that this is not an issue about an absence of good people doing good things. It's the fact that the fragmentation of all these different good things, if they're not connected, are not creating the cumulative effect for the benefit of the children. By being able to use technology, being able to use open source materials, then you're able now to start getting the synergistic effect that you can have in multiple different environments, just that you were talking about. So in many ways, the community now becomes the school. And in many ways, the school then becomes the resonant relationship within that larger community. And so I think this is a beautiful opportunity, again, predicated on real solid knowledge. The reason why we got that expansion grant from the Department of Education was because we were at that level that it's no longer correlational. It's no longer do we think that it'll work. We know that if teachers are faithful to those recommendations, children will achieve those outcomes. Children, on average, will be reading at the 5th grade rate at the end of 3rd grade, which is powerful, especially in high-need environments. So we know that now. And so the question is how do we take that knowledge and radiate it out into these multiple environments to support children in those environments to have that synergy and not those fragments that we have right now in community.
And I think that that's a really good point, and one of the things that we've also been looking at, because our United Way in particular and many across the country have really been changing the way that they operate, and we're really looking at making community level change, not just change within a certain segment of children in a certain program, but how can we really change and measure in a community-wide fashion. This is giving us the opportunity to be able to do and measure that. We've been working with a number of programs. We've been working with the My Brother's Keeper initiative. We've been working with Strive initiatives. We've been working with Boston Basics initiatives.
The campaign for grade level reading has
absolutely. The campaign
powerful.
for grade level reading is such a part of what we're doing. And also the National Summer Learning Association. But the campaign for grade level reading, which really focuses upon bringing all different segments of the community together to work together to be able to improve the outcomes in reading for children through third grade. And that might be doing something in a housing authority, it might be doing something in a health department or in a doctor's office or in the home.
Right. One of the other real benefits as we start thinking about community, when you're engaging the broader community, engaging the chambers of commerce, engaging the philanthropists, engaging your donors within a United Way context, is thinking about technology now, thinking about A2I as a huge data warehouse, that we now are able to give reports on a regular basis of the movement on these outcomes. We're able to demonstrate that here's what the baseline was before we were involved, or before you as a business was volunteering at this school, or you as a philanthropist was helping to underwrite some work that's going on in these other schools or these after-school programs. In the past, you never had a sense of, were we making an impact? Were we getting to change results? We now have the data to be able to report out on an ongoing basis the impact of these investments and the outcomes that result. What's most fascinating is that our work has demonstrated that the cost of achieving outcomes is far less expensive than the cost right now that we have when we aren't achieving the outcomes. It is far less expensive to have all of our children successful readers than the cost of children not being successful readers. And that cost appears in referrals to special education, teacher turnover, curriculum reinvestments, more assessments that people buy. It also appears just in terms of lifelong living, the number of people that are able to go to post-secondary education, the economic benefits. So in many ways, by zeroing in, as you said at the very beginning, the K-3 space, making sure all of our children result in terms of reading at or above grade level, is that you now have created in motion an ongoing savings, return on investment for our schools and our communities.
And it's interesting because in this particular area, we talk about our school taxes and how high they are. They're very high. But I think that people understand that schools are under constraints. If they have children who are coming to school a year, 2 years behind, or if they're not picking up quickly, or if they can't move into the kinds of curriculum that they'd like to in 4th or 5th grade, there are effects both on the school taxes and on the children and what their performance is and what they're able to do as they move forward in education. But you spoke earlier, just a minute ago, about donors. And it's really been very interesting because I'm finding that donors are changing a lot. They're becoming very savvy in what they're doing. It's not just a matter of this is the name of a good organization and I'll support it because I've heard of them. They're researching themselves. And what I've seen is a real difference when I go out to donors. There's a difference in the materials that I can prepare. There's a difference in how I present them. And I'm seeing a real awakening when I talk about the research and the great body of research that has gone into helping us decide where we're going with third grade reading and bringing the community in around it. I had one donor who's been a very good donor, who's been very, very supportive. The last letter I sent out just describing about some of the things that we were doing with third grade reading, sent an additional check for $5,000 and said there's more to come. Because they can see the value of the work. They know that we can measure the work. We can measure the difference in the children. We can measure it from an individual child standpoint, from a school standpoint, or from a community standpoint. We know where to target our efforts, where we need to bring in additional outside community partners, and where we can work with parents in a very new and different way.
Right. And the ability to work with parents then allows us to think about what's the best language to work with parents that could actually be different than the language that you work with a child, and how to create apps whether it's a phone app, whether it's an iPad, whether it's a Chromebook, which right now are now readily available after the tremendous effort that communities did to create technology access within their communities. Now we're able to use those in such a way to be able to deliver those supports, deliver those services in the language that's most helpful, all pointing towards how do we have more and more children successful at grade level reading in English within the United States.
I just want to go back to one point, and that is how we got here. We really were looking for something that was steeped in research, where we were working with prime research institutions. And so if you could just hit on very quickly who we're working with as part of this federal grant.
Well, the principal investigator for all of the research is Dr. Carol Connor, who right now is a Chancellor's Professor at the University of California, Irvine. She has participated in this from the University of Michigan. She partnered in with the Florida Center for Reading Research. She worked with Arizona State University and now at the University of California, Irvine. And so that research now is embedded in all of those universities. In very high-level research, you want other investigators to do that. So we had investigators that are out of SMU be able to replicate these studies in pre-K environments and also in other children's environments. So not only have we been able to have it within multiple different environments showing these same results, but we've been doing it with multiple different researchers. So you have the highest order of strength and rigor within the research that we have.
So I think that is really what drove us as an agency to move in this direction. We really wanted to have whatever we were doing to be based right in the research. We wanted to have the top people in the country telling us what to do and helping us with how to do it. And then we wanted to build strong community partnerships around it so that we can have the maximal impact on the success of the children and be able to measure it on a community level. So this has been very exciting for us as we've moved forward.
Yeah, and we couldn't thank you as a partner more, I think it's that synergy in terms of how communities can reach out and help other communities think about some of these really important solutions that are now available to us.
Yeah, and it's been interesting because we have been reaching out not only to agencies right within our own areas, we've been reaching out to United Ways in different parts of the country. United Ways that are grappling with the same things that we've been grappling with. And the campaign for grade level reading, which has really been focused upon this and with the Annie Casey Foundation for so long around third grade reading success. So doing this, working together, we can make a difference not only in our own community, but in the broader spectrum of children across the country to get all children on grade level reading by the end of third grade. It benefits the United Way, it benefits the community, but most importantly, it benefits the children in our community who will be able to be very successful, not only in third grade reading, but in life. Thank you, Jay. This has been a really wonderful conversation, and I hope to have you back another day because I think our listeners have learned a lot about United to Read and why United We Thrive.